Morning sunlight filtered through the glass facade of Cole Financial Group, glinting off a storm of flashing cameras outside. Headlines screamed from every monitor in the lobby. Lucas Cole calls off. Engagement with Isabella Green. Stocks plummet overnight. Inside the boardroom, chaos brewed like wildfire. Assistants rushed in and out carrying reports. The PR director was on the phone with investors, and the entire floor buzzed with panic. Sophia Brooks, the CEO's quiet and capable assistant, stood at her desk surrounded by ringing phones and frantic voices. She'd worked for Lucas for 3 years and had never seen the building this tense. Behind closed glass doors, Lucas Cole, 32, sat motionless, the calm center of a corporate hurricane. His tailored suit looked immaculate, but his jaw was tight, and his knuckles white around the pen he hadn't moved in minutes. When Sophia entered, clutching a tablet full of news alerts, she hesitated. "Sir, the Green family just issued a statement."
"They're accusing you of breach of contract." Lucas looked up, his tone deceptively even. "They wanted a merger, not a marriage." "I won't sell this company for love I don't feel." Sophia froze.
So that was it. The so-called engagement had been nothing but a business alliance gone sour. Outside, the sound of reporters shouting echoed through the glass. "Mr. Cole, why did you call off the wedding?"
"Is it true you left Isabella for another woman?"
Lucas's eyes flicked toward the window, then back to Sophia. His voice dropped to a low, steady whisper. "If the board thinks I'm unstable, we'll lose the investors by morning." He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window as the skyline of Manhattan gleamed cold and sharp behind him. Then he turned back to her, gaze unwavering, decision made. "Sophia."
"I need you to pretend to be my fiancée." Her heart skipped. Why me?"
"Because you're the only one I trust, and the only one they can't accuse of manipulating me." Sophia blinked, speechless. This is insane.
"I'm your assistant, not an actress. I'm not asking you to act."
"Just stand beside me." For a while, he took a deep breath, the first sign of vulnerability she'd ever seen in him. "If they believe."
"I've already moved on. I did on my own terms." The story dies. The room fell.
Silent, except for the faint hum of the city. Below, Sophia could feel her pulse hammering in her ears. Outside, the cameras flashed again, demanding answers, and before she could fully process the madness of what he was asking, she heard herself whisper, "All right."
"I'll do it." Lucas exhaled, relief flickering across his stoic face. "Good. Then from this moment on, Miss Brooks."
"You're the future, Mrs. Cole." The next morning, the city woke under a haze of grey light. Inside the towering Cole Financial Building, the rhythm of routine tried to resume, but everyone still whispered about the fake engagement. Sophia walked through the lobby with her coffee, ignoring the curious stares. Fiancée of the CEO, the rumor spread faster than she could breathe. Behind her calm expression, her mind spun back to the first day she'd ever met Lucas Cole, 3 years ago. He had arrived at the office at 7 a.m. sharp, his presence as sharp as his suit. People whispered that he was brilliant, but broken. Some said he hadn't smiled in years. Others said he still wore his wedding ring because he couldn't let go of the past. She'd later learned the truth. The ring belonged to Elena Wright, the woman he had loved and lost in a car accident, the only person who had ever made him laugh freely. That tragedy had turned Lucas from a visionary entrepreneur into a man who trusted no one. Except, perhaps Sophia. She had started as a temp assistant, unremarkable, quiet but unfailingly competent. While others tried to impress him, she simply did her job. Organized, precise, invisible. He noticed. Late nights in the office became routine. Lucas would dictate reports in his clipped, precise tone while she typed. Sometimes, between numbers and deadlines, silence would settle. Heavy, but not uncomfortable. Once, When the power went out during a thunderstorm, she found him standing by the window. Looking out over the rain-drenched skyline, "You can leave." "Miss Brooks," he had said. "I know," she'd replied softly, "but you shouldn't be alone during a blackout." He hadn't responded, just looked at her, as if surprised that someone would stay without being asked. From that night, something shifted. He started saying thank you, started trusting her with confidential projects, and, though they never crossed lines, Sophia began to see glimpses of the man behind the headlines, one who carried too much guilt and too little peace. Now, sitting in the back seat of Lucas's black Mercedes as they headed to a PR meeting about their engagement, Sophia looked sideways at him. His posture was perfect, his face unreadable. But his hand, the one resting on the seat between them, trembled slightly. She pretended not to notice, but she did. She always did. As they stopped at a red light, he finally spoke, voice low. "You must think I'm insane for asking you this." Sophia smiled faintly. "I think you're desperate, but I've seen worse." For the first time in days, his lips curved into the faintest, almost reluctant smile. Neither of them realized it yet. But the pretend engagement was no longer just about saving the company. It was the first step toward saving each other. The next few days unfolded like a rehearsal for a life Sophia never asked to live. PR consultants descended upon her with folders, rules, and endless questions. "What perfume do you wear?"
How would you address a duke?
"What color suits your engagement ring best?" Lucas watched from the corner of the room, arms folded, his face unreadable. "This is ridiculous," Sophia muttered after the third round of etiquette coaching.
I'm supposed to be your fiancé, not a royal understudy. He raised an eyebrow.
"In my world, the difference is negligible." She shot him a glare that only made the consultant scurry faster. By Thursday, a wardrobe team had taken over the penthouse. Gowns in silk and satin cascaded across the couch, glittering under the chandelier. When Sophia stepped out in a pale champagne dress, Lucas looked up from his laptop, and for a rare moment, words failed him. "You'll do," he said quietly, but his eyes lingered too long. "High praise," she replied dryly, though her pulse betrayed her. Their first public appearance came at the Elena Foundation Gala, the same venue where reporters had once hounded him for cancelling his engagement to Isabella Green. That arranged marriage had collapsed after her father withdrew his promised investment, a deal that was meant to stabilize the company post-scandal. Lucas had chosen his pride over profit. The tabloids called it arrogance. The board called it recklessness tonight. Everyone was watching to see if the CEO's new fiancée would restore his image or destroy it completely. Sophia clutched her glass of champagne a little too tightly. The room sparkled with laughter and gold, and she felt like an intruder. Lucas leaned closer, his breath warm near her ear. "Relax," he murmured. "You're doing fine," she turned, startled by the gentleness in his tone. "You're not exactly helping," he smirked. "Then look at me. Pretend the rest doesn't exist. It was supposed to be a line or a piece of the act." But when she met his eyes, the world really did fade. For the next few minutes, they moved through the crowd as if they belonged together. When someone asked how they met, Lucas didn't hesitate. "She spilled coffee on my tie," he said smoothly. "I decided she owed me dinner." Laughter followed. Sophia rolled her eyes, whispering, "That never happened." He leaned down, voice low. "They don't need to know that." Later that night, after the cameras were gone and the city lights blurred against the car window, Sophia exhaled a shaky breath. "I can't believe I survived that." Lucas glanced over.
Half a smile tugging his lips. "Survived? You carried the night. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, alive." Neither of them said it aloud.
But both knew, somewhere between pretending and surviving, something very real had begun. The ballroom at the Grand Lexington shimmered like liquid gold. Every chandelier, every note of the quartet whispered elegance. Sophia smiled and nodded on cue, her hand resting lightly in the crook of Lucas's arm. To anyone watching, they were perfection, poised, powerful, and in love. Lucas handled the crowd effortlessly. His tone was even, his posture impeccable, the consummate CEO. Yet, when he thought no one was looking, Sophia noticed the small things, his jaw tightening whenever someone mentioned second chances, the way his thumb brushed his cufflink like a nervous tick. During the toast, he leaned closer to her ear. "You're doing great," he said quietly. "So are you," she replied, though something in his eyes told her he wasn't entirely there. Then the air shifted. A murmur rippled through the guests as a woman in her late 50s entered the hall, elegant in black silk and pearls. Her gaze locked on Lucas like a ghost from another life. "Eleanor?" he whispered. Sophia turned. The name clicked instantly.
Eleanor Wright.
The mother of Elena, Lucas's former fiancée, who had died in the car crash 5 years ago. Eleanor crossed the floor with trembling composure. When she reached him, her voice was soft and sharp as glass. "You replaced her already?" The sound of the slap was delicate, almost polite, but the room froze. Sophia's heart dropped. She wanted to disappear, to take him away from every eye in the room. Lucas didn't move. He just lowered his head, eyes shadowed with the weight of guilt he had carried for too long. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wright," he said quietly.
"I never meant for you to see this." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Then why are you here smiling, Lucas? Why are you pretending again?"
She turned and walked away before he could answer. The gala resumed, but the illusion was broken. Cameras clicked, whispers spread. Sophia felt her chest tighten as she guided him out through the side door, into the cool night air. On the rooftop terrace, the city stretched endlessly below them. Lucas stood by the railing, the glow of the skyline flickering in his eyes. "She died because of me," he said hoarsely. "I was driving that night.
We argued about the merger.
She said I cared more about business than her."
And she wasn't wrong. Sophia stepped closer, the wind tugging at her dress.
"You don't have to keep punishing yourself." He turned to her, eyes raw. "I've been pretending ever since, Sophia. Pretending to move on. Pretending to be fine.
And tonight?"
She reminded me I'm still the same man who failed her." Without thinking, she reached out and held his hand. That "Stop pretending. Start forgiving yourself." For a long moment neither spoke. The city hummed below, indifferent to their pain. Then Lucas whispered, "You shouldn't see me like this. I think this is the first time I've actually seen you," she said softly. Morning headlines hit the city like a storm. Billionaire CEO's assistant exposed as fake fiancé.
Lucas Cole's secret love contract leaked.
The photos were everywhere. Sophia stepping out of his penthouse at dawn, still in her evening gown, her hair slightly undone. The internet didn't need context. It had already made its verdict. Sophia sat frozen at her kitchen table, staring at her phone as notification after notification lit up the screen. Her name, her face, her career, all twisted into something ugly. At the office, whispers chased her down every hallway. She was his assistant, right? Guess we know how she got that promotion. By noon, HR called her in. The message was sterile and rehearsed. "We're placing you on temporary leave pending the board's review." She walked out of the building under a rain that seemed to fall only for her. Across the city, in the top-floor conference room of Cole Financial Group, the tension was suffocating. Lucas stood before the board of directors.
Expression unreadable, one of the older members slammed a folder on the table. "This scandal is killing our reputation."
The shareholders are furious. "You need to distance yourself from her." Immediately, he folded his hands calmly. "Sophia did nothing wrong." "Perception is reality," another snapped. "If you don't act, you'll drag us all down with you." There it was. The same voice of control that had haunted him his whole life. The same logic his uncle Edward Cole had drilled into him. Image over integrity, numbers over people. Lucas's jaw tightened. "So you want me to lie?" Edward leaned forward, voice smooth and poisonous. "I want you to protect the company. The girl will survive. You won't. If this continues," silence stretched. The city lights reflected off the windows behind him like shards of ice. Finally, Lucas nodded once, a gesture that broke something inside him. That evening, Sophia returned home to find a single envelope slipped under her door. "Stay away from the press. Don't speak to anyone. This will blow over." It was unsigned, but she knew the handwriting. "Lucas." Her hands trembled as she crumpled the note. "Blow over?" she whispered. "So that's it."
"I'm a problem to manage now." She sat down on the floor, tears mixing with anger.
The man who once said she was the only one he trusted had chosen silence over truth. Again. Days turned into weeks. The city moved on, but she didn't. Lucas worked behind the scenes, quietly trying to contain the damage, gathering evidence against his uncle. But every time he reached for his phone to call her, he hesitated, afraid his voice would only make it worse. Sophia, meanwhile, poured herself into freelance work, rebuilding piece by piece what the world had taken from her. And yet, every night before she fell asleep, one thought haunted them both, the same unspoken ache. Maybe pretending had been easier than facing what was real. The elevator doors slid open with a low chime. Sophia froze. It had been 3 weeks since she'd seen him. 3 weeks since the scandal that destroyed everything. Now Lucas Cole stood in her office doorway, coat still damp from the rain, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," he began quietly. "But I need your help." Sophia crossed her arms. "You needed me before too. Then you disappeared." He took a slow breath as if steadying himself.
"I didn't disappear. I was digging for the truth." He slid a folder across her desk.
"My uncle orchestrated the leak, every headline, every photo. He wanted the board to turn on me to force a sale of my shares." Sophia opened the folder. Inside were emails, payment logs and statements, all leading back to Edward Cole. Her pulse quickened.
"Why show me this?" "Because I can't do this alone," Lucas said simply.
"I need someone the board can't accuse of bias."
"I need you." She stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "This doesn't erase what you did." "I know," he said, voice low.
"But maybe it can make things right." They met again 2 nights later in a quiet cafe downtown. Going over their plan, Sophia would pose as an ally, contacting Edward through a trusted source, pretending to negotiate her silence. Lucas would monitor the exchange from a distance. It felt dangerous, reckless even. But for the first time since everything fell apart, Sophia felt a sense of purpose. When Edward arrived at the cafe, charm dripping from every word, she forced herself to smile. "I don't blame you, Sophia," he said smoothly.
"You were just collateral damage. I could make it up to you. I'll help you start fresh." Her heart pounded, but she kept her tone steady. "And what about Lucas?"
"You really think he'll hand over those shares?" Edward chuckled.
He won't have a choice."
"Once I control the narrative, I control the company. That's how power works." Hidden beneath the table, the small recorder in Sophia's bag blinked red. Every word captured. 3 days later, the boardroom was packed. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as Edward presented his proposal for emergency restructuring. Lucas sat at the head of the table, silent. Then calmly, he nodded to Sophia, seated at the opposite end. She pressed play. Edward's voice filled the room, dripping with arrogance and greed. "He won't have a choice."
"Once I control the narrative, I control the company." Gasps rippled across the room.
The board turned on Edward, faces pale with shock. Lucas rose, eyes locked on his uncle. "You taught me everything about manipulation. But you forgot one thing. Truth lasts longer than fear. Security escorted Edward out, his empire collapsing around him. After the meeting, silence settled in the empty boardroom. Sophia turned to leave, but Lucas spoke softly. "You didn't have to do this for me." She looked back.
I didn't. I did it for the truth. A small, weary smile crossed his face.
Either way, thank you. For the first time in weeks, the distance between them didn't feel like a wall, but a bridge waiting to be crossed. 3 months later, the skyline of New York shimmered beneath a curtain of golden light. Inside the ballroom of the Astoria Hotel, cameras flashed, crystal chandeliers sparkled, and a banner hung proudly across the stage. Cole Financial Group, empowering women to build tomorrow. Sophia stood by the podium, dressed in an elegant silver gown. Her name had finally appeared in the headlines, not as the billionaire's
Fake fiancée, but as the woman who rebuilt her company's image. She took a breath and
smiled as she addressed the crowd. When people say reputation is everything, I've learned that integrity means even more. This foundation exists to help women who, like me, once had to prove they belonged. The audience applauded. Across the room, Lucas watched, proud, silent, a faint smile curving his lips. He hadn't spoken to her much since the boardroom incident, choosing to give her space. But tonight, watching her command the room with grace and confidence, he knew one thing for sure. He had never stopped loving her. When the speeches ended and the orchestra began to play, he approached quietly, his presence drawing curious glances. Sophia turned and froze. Lucas. He stopped a few steps away, hands in his pockets, his soft warmth replacing his usual composure. "Could you dance with me?" he asked gently. "Not because of a contract."
not because of the cameras, just
"Because there's nowhere else I'd rather be." Her lips parted, then curved into a smile.
I thought you didn't dance. I didn't, he admitted. Until you, he extended a hand.
She hesitated only a moment before taking it. As they moved on to the dance floor, the orchestra swelled with a slow, timeless melody. Lights glimmered around them like distant stars. The crowd faded away, leaving only the two of them. Sophia whispered, "I used to think pretending made everything easier." Lucas met her gaze. "Pretending is easy."
But the truth, that's where courage lives. She looked up at him, eyes bright. So what happens now? He smiled.
"Now we stop pretending." The music rose, and he pulled her closer, resting his forehead lightly against hers. For the first time in years, there was no shadow between them, no contract.
No guilt, no ghosts, just a man and a woman.
Standing in the light they built together. As the night came to an end, Sophia glanced out the grand window at the reflection of the city below.
Alive and luminous, in that glow, she finally understood. Healing wasn't about erasing the past.
It was about finding someone who helped her see it differently. Lucas squeezed her hand gently, as if answering her thoughts. "Welcome home," he whispered, and for the first time, she truly believed it. The first time in weeks. The distance between them didn't feel like a wall, but a bridge waiting to be crossed.